Welcome back to Beyond This World. Thanks, guys, for tuning in today and click on this video. So this is a follow-up from my other video, the CCP's Not So Secret Secret. And this is sort of explaining a little bit more on that video. This is going further down the rabbit hole, essentially. So buckle in, guys. It's going to get interesting. This guy, Scoop of Coop, he's actually really good. He's got a lot of videos that go or he deep dives into a lot of really interesting alternative theory sort of concepts. And this one in particular came out really like quite recently, funnily enough. So yeah, enjoy this one, guys. I'll stop it yeah, occasionally.
Like and subscribe. Now let's dive. I was and am not still quite sure how to start this topic in this video. There's so many places we have to go today, and I really don't think you guys are ready for this because I wasn't when I started this. This is a topic that has been covered up by so many lies and so much misinformation and slot media from every side that the truth is almost indistinguishable from fiction. But I do think that I have found the path through the proverbial forest, so let's see what we can find. First of all, because of the age we live in, there is one word you are not going to hear me say in this video, and it's the name of the topic for this video. So instead of saying, that thing on the whiteboard, I'm going to refer to it by its laboratory name, C9H9NO3, or for our sake, C9 for short. I may on occasion refer to it as other things throughout this video in passing, but for the most part, I'm going to try and stick to C9 for continuity's sake. I want the chance for as many people as possible to see this because of how important it is to understand, so I shall be playing ball with the forced censorship of our age. That being said, we can officially dive. C9 is one of those substances that has many different stories being told about it, and it can be hard to know where to start with something like that. On the one hand, we have heard stated that the PDF file class is using it to extend their lives, and on the other, we've been told it's just a completely made up thing that your boomer uncle fell for on Facebook. The one that worships Trump, not Biden. Now, we haven't covered nearly enough ground to make an argument for the first claim, but we are going to get there. As for C9 being fake, however, that is obviously untrue, as it is a genuine chemical compound known the world around. So then, if it's actually real, what is C9? At its simplest, C9 is a compound that the body produces, but I think this is going to be better to explain visually, so let's head to the whiteboard for this one. C9 is the resulting substance of the adrenal glands producing the hormone adrenaline, which is released in response to frightening, painful, or otherwise stressful situations. The amount of adrenaline and therefore C9 in one's body varies depending on the level of the situation. The more stressful, the more adrenaline, and therefore the more C9. I'm not going to try and bore you here and make it seem like you're in a high school chemistry class, but it is important to understand because this substance many mainstream media pundits claim is just a conspiracy theory, is, like we said, very real. And intriguingly, despite being a medical substance, is reported as having essentially zero medical purposes and yet is still simultaneously mass produced. The lab version, obviously, which seems odd, but hey, what do I know? Continuing, when talking about C9, people typically begin thinking of the PDF file class like we mentioned, and the harvesting of it for eternal youth, as well as some spiritual and psychedelic effects. It may sound a little ridiculous, maybe a lot ridiculous, but I would argue it's actually not that much. Indeed, C9 has been known to modern science for the better part of a century, but I think we can make an argument that its effects have unknowingly been known to man for centuries. Let's take the American Indian or Native American, whatever you prefer, I don't care. What I find intriguing about them is that they have a very unique history. One thing that frustrated me ad nauseum when I was in school was the noble savage myth, where the natives were all Pocahontas-esque and just desired to be left to their own devices, painting with all the colors of the wind. When in reality, no such thing could be further from the truth. The natives on this continent were very clever, strategically minded, territorial, and exceptionally violent. Obviously, there were many tribes, and that doesn't apply to all to the same degree, but as a whole, it's a fair description. Few were genuinely peace-loving, and war was basically constant. Among these tribes, however, there are several standout in terms of violence. And for our case, let's take, for instance, the Iroquois. They ruled a vast empire, estimated to be nearly 25 million acres in size, which is an unfathomable amount of land. But you're saying, probably right now, cool, whatever, dude, I don't care. What do the Iroquois have to do with C9? and as it turns out, quite a bit, because more impressive and in the darkest way possible was the ruthlessness with which the Iroquois maintained their lands and subsequently their power. Indeed, many tribes throughout the Iroquois Confederacy were known cannibals, extremely violent, devilishly inspired, and seeking something ethereal from their enemies. The Iroquois enjoyed cannibalism, which is already a bad look. However, they went beyond that, deciding that there was something more potent to the flesh and blood in the torture of their victims. Take, for instance, the case of missionary Brebeuf, a brother in Christ who sought to spread the light to a new continent, and had seen much success in doing so. He was a friend of the natives, and many of them had come to share the faith alongside him. However, other members of the Iroquois did not share an adoration for the Lord, and on the 16th of March of 1649, he was captured along with a man named Lamont, who was a Catholic priest. The two were tortured to the very bitter end, and warning, I am going to be reading an account from the Christian natives who witnessed the events that were imprisoned alongside him, and it's going to be horrifying. I mean that, you really, if there are kids here, they actually don't let them listen to this. I am going to reiterate once again about how serious I am. If I was a child and I heard this, I would have been horrified. A veritable account of the martyrdom and blessed death of Father Jean de Brebeuf and of Father Gabriel Le Allemand in New France in the country of the Hurons by the Iroquois enemies of the faith. The context is Father Jean de Brebeuf and Father Gabriel Le Allemand had set out from their cabin to go to a small village to preach the word to some Iroquois, and the village was named St. Ignace. The distance was less than a league away, but it was still enough for the following to take place. The following account comes from captured Christian natives who were imprisoned alongside the two Christian missionaries, and what they saw has been verified by other witnesses as well. In addition to that, the body was later recovered and it matched exactly what had been described. This is an account from the natives of that time. The Iroquois came to the number of 1,200 men, took our village, and seized Father Brebeuf and his companion and set fire to all the huts. They proceeded to vent their rage on those two fathers, for they took them both and stripped them entirely naked and fastened each to a post. They tied both of their hands together, they tore the nails from their fingers, they beat them with a shower of blows from cudgels on the shoulders, the loins, the belly, the legs, and the face, there being no part of their body which did not endure this torment. The savages told us further that although Father de Brebeuf was overwhelmed under the weight of these blows, he did not cease continually to speak of God and to encourage all the new Christians who were captives like himself to suffer well, in order to go in company with him to paradise. While the good father was encouraging these people, at this point there was an angry Iroquois who had heard the word and then turned away from it. He began taunting Father Brebeuf, pouring buckets of scalding hot water over him and making fun of baptism, and saying that he was helping him get to his eternal destination faster. After this, they continue the torture, creating a kind of like necklace of hatchets that went around Brebeuf's body, and they were also burning red hot so that if and whenever he moved, he was burned and sliced, but also if he didn't move, he was constantly burned by the hatchets. After that, they put him on a belt of bark full of pitch and resin and set fire to it, which roasted his whole body. During all these torments, Father endured like a rock, insensible to fire and flames, which astonished all the bloodthirsty wretches who tormented him. His zeal was so great that he preached continually. They continued to mock Father Brebeuf and his faith, but it evidently worked because the Iroquois Christians remained true to the very end. Those butchers then, seeing that the good father began to grow weak, made him sit down on the ground, and one of them, taking a knife, cut off the skin covering his skull. Another of those barbarians, seeing that the good father would soon die, made an opening in the upper part of his chest and tore out his heart, which he roasted and ate. Others came to drink his blood, still warm, which they drank with both hands, saying that Father de Brebeuf had been very courageous to endure so much pain as they had given him, and that by drinking his blood, they would become courageous like him. And I cannot lie, Brebeuf is a man of infinite courage. I can't speak highly enough of a guy like that.
I thought I would save the details because they were rather specific, but there is also a scene where the natives then fillet his legs and arms and eat that in front of him while he's still alive. We don't need to go into the detail though.
However, there are some points to emphasize, specifically that of the consumption of his flesh and most prominently his blood. The natives admired how strong he was and wanted to consume him to gain his strength, making sure to execute him the moment he could no longer sustain life so that he didn't die in weakness, but perished in his strength. And then these natives began two-hand gulping blood from the still warm body of Brebeuf. Indeed, we can understand this is not a one-off experience, but it is a custom in the culture, and it's understood that the power was greater in the blood of an individual who could withstand such torment. And at this moment, I want to strike back into the intro earlier that you may have just thought was me wasting your time. Do you recall when I stated that the more C9, indeed the more potent C9 is produced, the longer and more stress the individual is enduring? Well, I would have to imagine then that Brebeuf emitted some of the most, and I can't believe I'm going to say this, delicious and powerful C9 ever, as he lasted for literal hours under what I would describe as the worst kind of torture imaginable before relinquishing his soul to the Lord. Obviously, I'm not making the argument that the wheelless natives were somehow aware of the existence of C9, but I am suggesting that what had remained unknown to, quote, modern science until the 20th century appears to have certainly not remained unknown to ancient customs. What they saw as the essence of a fervent servant of God that would empower them, we know as a hormone that generates unimaginable effects that we shall soon cover. It is also worth mentioning that the Aztecs share a similar ritual to the Iroquois. Those pyramids obese Americans ramble up thinking they look so pretty are simply altars built to ancient demons for whom the Aztecs fed with the blood of their people as well as slaves. Like Americans with football and carcinogenic foods, the Aztecs are known for ripping out the still beating hearts of victims and drinking the resulting blood. There's a little bit of argument here, but we do know that there was a drink given to these human sacrifice offerings prior to the sacrifice. It's believed it contained cocoa and blood, but I've seen a lot of argument going back and forth on this matter. Either way though, we do know that there were a host of customs that the Aztecs enjoyed, which involved the consumption of human blood and the spilling of human blood. And mind you, like I said, these are just two native groups of dozens or hundreds that practice these sorts of horrific things. Something for you to mull over as we continue. That being said, the reference to C9 and its consumption and psychedelic effects cannot be overlooked. Its history can be tracked through the Middle Ages to ancient tales of vampiric beings, as well as very literal court proceedings. Like I said, I want this video to remain up, and we are already pushing the limits here. However, on screen now is an image associated with a specific incident where 6 children were slurped of their blood by a certain group of people. Feel free to go your merry way with that research, and if you know what you were looking for, there are indeed court proceedings covering this case. Hard to find the unbiased ones. There are more, and one specific one we'll touch on later, but for now, we're not there yet. I can yap.
What I sort of think of is the movie Monsters Inc. and the way that they would get the kids to scream and then put their screams into a canister. It's almost eerily similar to C9.
For hours about the references to blood and C9 throughout history, but I think another time is probably best for that. Because reaching forward a few hundred years, C9 was basically unknown until the 1950s. It had been successfully synthesized in a lab somewhere in the later 1940s after incidences in World War II where soldiers were given oxygenated blood when morphine was unavailable and began, for lack of a better term, to trip balls, which sparked later curiosity in the post-war period, and this patent would be granted for the laboratory production of C9 in 1952. If you're distrusting Fed, the receipts are on the screen right now. But to modern science, whatever that actually means, its depth of effect on the human body and mind would remain untraversed for some more time, until 3 funny fellows popped up in Canada of all places. These men were Abram Hoffer, Humphrey Fortescue Osmond, and the last and certainly not least, John Raymond Smithies with a Y. All 3 of these men were doctors back when that still meant something and had some interesting thoughts on that whole C9 thing. These gentlemen came to form a hypothesis, one that initially sounds bizarre, that there is a direct link between C9 and schizophrenia. Although as we shall see, it's likely not as strange as it may initially seem. The last 2 men mentioned, Dr. Osmond and Smithies, both worked at the Weyburn Mental Hospital in Saskatchewan, Canada. This place was horrifying, known for its lobotomies and insulin shock therapies, which is evidently when so much insulin is injected into someone that they go into a coma, a process which is often repeated for weeks. The more you know, as well as the casual, forceful injection of extreme doses of LSD into unwitting patients. But it was also unintentionally the tramping grounds for groundbreaking science, these 2 men's work. Being in such close proximity to schizophrenics and often treating them, they sought a solution to such a problem that had ruined the minds of so many. And in 1952, they released a paper where the 2 men discussed the molecular similarities between mescaline and C9. Mescaline being the psychedelic substance that is derived from a couple kinds of cactus. It's simple, but will take your brain far away from here. And the effects of mescaline these researchers noticed mirrors very closely the symptoms of schizophrenics. The two surmised that obviously the body wasn't producing mescal in such massive amounts as would be necessary and on a daily basis to cause schizophrenia, but they did know that schizophrenia and anxiety, as well as stress-induced states, had already been known and linked to one another. And so they presumed that perhaps something researchers had missed is how the body is breaking down adrenaline, the hormone connected to stressful situations, and maybe schizophrenics weren't processing that right at all. And so they uncovered, or more accurately, really paid the first serious attention to C9 and what it can do and how it affects the body, which caused them to write a paper that we already mentioned. It's actually super interesting and worth the read. You can find it below, but it doesn't compare to what happens when the researchers consumed raw C9 themselves and experienced something beyond bizarre. And this was just C9 that was made in the lab, not the OG stuff. For reference, this was Humphrey's second time consuming C9. The first time was a smaller dose, this one was a larger one, and we'll begin there. This is from a book called The Witness, and it's discussing Humphrey Osmond's experience on the C9 substance, as witnessed to by several other doctors and several other observers. I had 5 milligrams of C9 this time because we thought that it was probably deteriorating. I saw only a few visual patterns with my eyes closed, and I had the feeling that there was something wonderful waiting to be seen, but somehow I couldn't see it. However, in the outside world, everything seemed sharper and the Van Gogh was three-dimensional. I began to feel that I was losing touch with everything. My sister telephoned, and although I am usually glad to hear her voice, I couldn't feel any warmth or happiness. I watched a group of patients dancing, and although I enjoy watching dancing and the envious interest of one who is clumsy on his feet, I didn't have a flicker of feeling. As we drove back to Abe's house, a pedestrian walked across the road in front of us. I thought we might run him down and watched with detached curiosity. I had no concern for the victim. We did not knock him down. I began to wonder whether I was a person anymore, and to think I might be a plant or stone as my feeling for these inanimate objects increased. My feeling for and my interest in humans diminished. I felt indifferent towards humans and had to curb myself from making unpleasant personal remarks about them. I had no inclination to say more or less than I observed. If I was asked if I liked a picture, I said what I felt and disregarded the owner's feelings. I did not wish to talk and found it more comfortable to gaze at the floor or a lamp. Time seemed to be of no importance. I slept well that night and awoke feeling lively, but although I had to attend a meeting that morning, I did not hurry myself. Eventually, I had to be more or less dragged out of the house by Abe. I had to get my car from the garage where it was being repaired. There was some trouble about finding it in the garage. When at last I was seated in the driver's seat, I realized that I couldn't drive it through traffic. Although quite able to do so usually, I did not, however, feel anxious or distressed by this, but persuaded the garage proprietor to drive me to my destination. I would, I believe, have normally found this a humiliating situation. I did not feel humiliated. I attended the scientific meeting, and during it, I wrote this note. Dear Abe, this dang stuff is still working. The odd thing is that stress brings it on after about 15 minutes. I have this glass wall, other side of the barrier feeling. It is fluctuant, almost intangible, but I know it is there. The stress was the minor one of getting the car. I have a feeling that I don't know anyone here, absurd but unpleasant, although also some slight ideas of references arising from my sensations of oddness. I've just begun to wonder if my hands are writing this. Crazy, of course. I fluctuated for the rest of the day. While being driven home by my psychologist colleague, Mr. B. Stefaniuk, I discovered that I could not relate distance and time. I would see a vehicle far away on the long, straight prairie roads, but would be uncertain whether we might not be about to collide with it. We had coffee at a wayside halt, and here I became disturbed by the covert glances of a sinister-looking man. I could not be sure whether he was really doing this or not. I went out to look at 2 wrecked cars, which had been brought into a nearby garage. I became deeply preoccupied with them and the fate of their occupants. I could only tear myself away from them with an effort. I seemed in some way to be involved in them. Later in the day, when I reached home and the telephone rang, I took no notice of it and allowed it to ring itself out. Normally, no matter how tired I am, I respond to it. By the morning of 19/10/52, I felt that I was my usual self again. So yeah, this high lasted over 24 hours. This is one of the only descriptions of what the C9 substance is like, and obviously this was the lab-made stuff, not the real stuff or the stuff harvested from people. And what he describes is wild. He describes not feeling like he's human, not caring about other humans, contemplating possible killings of humans, and also a bizarre inability to feel embarrassment or guilt, a lack of emotion overall. I also do find it a curious note of that person he believed was watching him and he was paranoid about him. Who knows what that was about? It is very odd. After this, new studies began popping up across the globe, For instance, in France, cats were injected into the brain with it, and they displayed some strange results, including falling into a sleep trance-like state, and at times the cats would jolt up and stare at random parts of the ceiling. It's also noted that these cats would then start contorting themselves into bizarre and uncomfortable and even painful positions, and then stay there frozen with eyes wide open, howling. Also important for the prevailing narrative, libido spikes wildly on this stuff, and one laboratory's large cat tried to make interspecies love to the researcher's dog. And many of these scientists had also tested the effects of mescaline and LSD on these animals and found that C9 had a longer lasting and deeper effect on the test subjects' brainwaves. And from these tests, these researchers came to a fascinating discovery. Our group of 3 men learned that the exact same symptoms are presented in C9 consumption as in schizophrenics. And literally all of the same symptoms are found. It's crazy. They create a whole chart with the severity. It's worth looking at. It's on screen now, and documents are attached below. And from here, these men then went on to continue their studies in the field, finding what they believe to be the cure for schizophrenia, which they also have successfully used on hundreds of people. In one case, there was a patient that Humphrey is quoted, I believe it's Humphrey, as saying was originally completely schizophrenic and is now a high-level researcher in the medical field. So whatever they were doing was clearly working. And I'm not kidding about this. There's a ton of data on this. It's a whole long big deal and not the exact point of this video, but me saying this will probably make some go, you're lying, right? No, you can look it up. It really is out there. And I believe that it's been covered because it's not quite as large of a moneymaker as the current schizophrenic medication. But don't take my word for it. What's the phrase of the 2020s that everyone was quoting? Oh yeah, that's right. Trust the science. Today, however, the C9 studies stand as arguably the foremost example of the reality of this substance and how powerful it is, for both good and bad, because Hoffner's work caught the attention of some 3-letter organizations, specifically the CIA, who was playing tiddlywinks with mind control. And if you remember the sort of results that the C9 had on humans and animals, kind of sounds like people who are malleable to such things as mind control. For instance, the references to the cats being in a trance-like state. And I'm sure this is just a coincidence. I don't actually believe in those, but let's just say it's a coincidence that the foremost expert on the substance was then later directly involved with projects like MK Ultra. Oh. Nor should it seem even more suspicious than how the substance has been discredited in the ensuing years by establishment voices. I do, however, find it worth noting that Dr. Osmond was helping others down their psychedelic journey simultaneous to his work with the CIA, and I'm sure it's just a coincidence as well that Dr. Osmond guided Aldous Huxley in his Hollywood home on his groovy ride into oblivion 1 month after the CIA officially launched MK Ultra. Funny how that works. And from that experience, Aldous Huxley would go on to write an essay called The Doors of Perception about how great this all is and how we should all be taking psychedelics, specifically referencing the potency of C9. And if the name Aldous Huxley is ringing a bell for you, or however you pronounce his first name, it's because he wrote the eponymous novel Brave New World in 1932, well before this psychedelic journey. And Aldous Huxley's brother is certainly no one of note, except that he totally is, being the fellow that popularized and modernized the idea of transhumanism, the concept that
Yeah, so the guy that was working for the CIA also had a hand in the MK Ultra as well as this adrenochrome thing. The dots all join up, don't they? It's all really crazy, and the fact that somebody has to be under extreme amounts of stress for the C9 to be potent enough, and it also has the ability to give a person energy, to give people that extreme high, is why it's so addictive. And all these PDF files are essentially addicted to the C9 as well.
all these tech lizard bros and boomers seem to worship. Great to know the CIA was up in all that from day one then. However, that is not where the literary and pop culture references to this substance end. Indeed, the roots go much further, and obviously, as you're watching this video, and I'm making it, haven't ceased to grow. For instance, let's look at the 1971 novel by Hunter S. Thompson, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. Now, I'm not a film critic, thankfully, because that would suck, so I am going to simplify it for you. There are 2 dudes in Las Vegas. It's meant to be a metaphor for the pursuit of the American dream. One of them is a lawyer named Dr. Gonzo, based off the real-life figure Oscar Zeta Acosta, and Raoul Duke. Raoul is meant to represent Hunter S. Thompson, the author. They do copious amounts of substances of various kinds, getting higher than the Empire State, but their lovers are not waiting for them just to cross the bar. Instead, Dr. Gonzo gives Hunter's character a vial of red liquid. And if you had to guess what he calls it, what might you suspect? Yes, C9, but the real name. Worth mentioning, C9 was not very well known to anybody, even within the scientific community at this point, let alone the general public, and
I love how that's Johnny Depp in the background holding the red bag, and there's literally a picture of him during 2020 or maybe 2021 where he looks absolutely terrible. And a lot of people were saying it's because he doesn't have his C9.
and we know that Hunter S. Thompson was speaking in large part from experience, so just keep that in mind. Gonzo then goes on to describe how he came into possession of such a substance, and naturally we learn along with Hunter's character, it was given to Dr. Gonzo by a Satanist who couldn't afford to pay him. The Satanist told Dr. Gonzo that the substance in the bottle was extremely valuable and far more potent than any other drug he had ever consumed, and that just a drop of it would make LSD seem like ginger beer. And by LSD, of course, I mean Lakeshore Drive, the road, which will take you up or down, one might say from rags on up to riches, but I digress. Because Hunter doesn't stop there with his writing, seemingly knowing something that would later become part of the pop culture narrative, he notifies us that the Satanist was also a known PDF file. Shocker, right? And the C9 presumably came from one of his victims. Ah, and there it is, saying the quiet part out loud, I dare say. Hunter's character, which is meant to be embodying, to a large extent, real experiences, like we've said, then takes a bunch of the C9 and begins his ride into a horror show, as Dr. Gonzo literally transforms into a Satan-esque figure. I don't know how many times I can say this, but Hunter was in large part speaking from actual experiences for this book. Just want to reiterate, that is important. He was so clearly an odd dude, but also he was rather based and had an admirable streak of distrusting the government. Unsurprisingly then, considering what Hunter obviously knew as far back as the 1970s, Hunter would be found deceased in 2005 in his Aspen home. Of course it was labeled a self-ending, but really, only a string bean stuck to the end of a kazoo could fall for all that hot air. It's one of the worst frame jobs I've ever seen, on par with Kurt Cobain and Vince Foster, and has all the usual patented government-done hallmarks like active plans for things in the future deeply looked forward to, and family in the other room who would have heard such a loud pop as is said to have taken Hunter's life. But I do want to continue to note that this man, who seemed to display to some extent an intimate knowledge of C9 and where it comes from, also stated in an interview 2 years prior to his death, as well as many times personally thereafter and before, that he feared being taken out by the feds. Most prominently, a close compatriot of Hunter's named Paul William Roberts, who received a call the day before Hunter's demise from Hunter, where he was whispering, extremely frightened, that he had uncovered hard evidence that the government was involved in the staging of the events that occurred the week after September the 4th. I mean, if I were a betting man then, let's just say, my shekels aren't on the prevailing narrative that Hunter did it himself. And it's pretty convenient that Hunter had a broken leg at the time, making it difficult for him to fight back. And most comical to me is that despite the media lying and saying the opposite for the first few days, Hunter S. Thompson, the prolific author, synonymous for many with the written word itself, despite being at his typewriter, didn't bother to leave a letter. In fact, there was a blank page in the typewriter, and all it said was the word counselor. So yeah, put that C9 in your pipe and smoke it. Thus, it's very
I just find it really interesting that they made it look like a suicide for him, but then also you've got Virginia Giuffre, which is an Epstein victim who was found here in Perth, Western Australia, on her property 20 minutes north of Perth, or sorry, 2 hours north of Perth, I think. And yeah, they made it look like a suicide for her as well. And she had two younger boys, and I just don't think she killed herself. You know, she was a fighter her whole life. There's just no way. I don't think she killed herself. And I think it was Prince Andrew that ultimately got to her in the end.
fair to say that Hunter is simply a man who knew far too much for a certain group to leave him alive. But as we know, this isn't a story about Hunter S. Thompson, but it does seem that those who know, you know? Like Anthony Burgess, a man whose seminal work, A Clockwork Orange, was published on March 17th of 1962, and it also contains references to what is presumably C9. The world of Clockwork Orange is disturbing, drug-filled, and debaucherous, so basically the exact same as today. Importantly though, the novel contains a scene where a few of the characters pull up to the Korova Milk Bar, which is an establishment that can't sell liquor because it doesn't possess a liquor license. So it sells other creative or special drinks, you might say. And I also want to note that the entire book, A Clockwork Orange, is filled with its own slang and unique language, which is made up and yet somehow rather humorously, despite how old it is, sounds eerily similar to today's brain rot. But digressing, Anthony named the language Nadsat, so him leaving out some letters or changing spellings of words is not at all uncommon. Well, what they sold there was milk plus something else. They had no license for selling liquor, but there was no law yet against prodding some of the new veshies, which they used to put into the old Moloko. So you compete it with the Velocet or Synthesmic or Drencrom or one of the other Veshies, which would give you a nice quiet horse show, 15 minutes admiring Bog and all his holy angels and saints in your left shoe with lights bursting all over your mozg. Or you could peat milk with knives in it, as we used to say, and these would sharpen you up and make you ready for a bit of dirty 20 to 1. And that was what we were repeating this evening. I'm starting off the story with. Bog is slang for God, and the description of the trip that Drencrom takes you on is indeed very similar to that which is described so long ago by the initial researchers of C9 like Osmond. Seriously, if you read his other stuff, it gets even crazier and more like what this Drencrom drink is described as being. It should be stated though that this is not the only reference to C9 in A Clockwork Orange, as it makes its way into the book at minimum 3 other times, as well as in Stanley Kubrick's film on the subject. Furthermore, there are indeed other references in odd places, like the rock band Sisters of Mercy, who published a bizarre song named You Know What on the matter in the early 1980s. This is the chorus. Not black and red boys frightened by the night, but the Catholic monochrome. The Catholic girls now, stark and they're dark and white, dreaded monochrome, the Sisters of Mercy, high tide, wide-eyed, sped on, for the Sisters of Mercy, filled with panic in their eyes, rise, dead on C9. Obviously, they don't say C9, they say the actual word. What a bizarre reference to faith and this substance. Something clearly seems to be going on here as well. Thus, the compound is not without its lore. However, let's not bore one another with too much history. Instead, let's fast forward to more recent times and see why C9 has become such a big deal. As we know, basically everyone in power at this point would seem to either be compromised or is killed for not being compromised, and efficient mechanisms and systems have been established to facilitate the processes of those who are really in control. Take, for instance, Epstein's Island, or the Franklin scandal, or Project Delta, or need I really continue? I think you get it. Because of these activities, as well as many others, rumors have abounded as to what precisely is happening in these highfalutin circles. And one of the most popular rumors is that the globalist class is drinking the blood of children to harness their power. In 1990, this sounded insane. In 2000, it was insane to most, but not all, but every year since then has slowly dragged more and more people to the realization that this may not be so far from the truth. Take, for instance, the Satanist, an individual for whose celebratory calendar is riddled with blood-requiring affairs. The majority of Satanists would like to deny, but can't, that these rituals call for the blood of a human, and often a child is considered best by them. It's a tale as old as time and the written word. Take, for instance, the Hebrews, who would on occasion frequently turn their back on God and do things like sacrifice their children to Baal and build altars to him. Baal being another name for the demonic entity Moloch, also worshipped by Babylonians and other pagan cultures. Moloch has many depictions, most often a bull, but there are occasions where he's depicted as an owl. Most people would like to think that this sort of pagan demon worship has been left behind, but very clearly it hasn't. The altars have modernized and the systems become obscured, but we do know it happens, and this fixation with the child has remained. Like, for instance, Bohemian Grove, where the people who decide if and what you will eat meet every year to engage in homosexual relations, worship Satan, and sacrifice what has been described as both a real child or an effigy of a child to a giant stone figure reminiscent of an owl, and the owl is obviously meant to represent Moloch or a similar entity, a figure of ancient custom where one would place their child inside a fire, sacrificing the soul and body to the demon. At this point, several explorations have been conducted, and we know the inside of this place, what it looks like, and that the statues are very real, and what happens is very real. So all the proof that we have exists, and it's undeniable that these things happen. And therefore it's not unreasonable to assume that the drinking of blood is in practice as well. As we have discussed, it's an ancient custom with roots that can be traced back thousands of years. And really the only difference being argued today is that it's being done in a more refined or really modernized manner. Instead of being tied to a pole or something like what would happen in the olden times, if you follow that link on screen, one is only suggesting that it's done now by white-coated fiends and laboratory equipment. Once you know that C9 is real and has a long history, it's not actually that hard to believe. There are more cases than I can count that if you follow that link in the historical record, you might slowly begin to find as you dive further. If only you are going to look deep enough, that is. There, however, is another problem. C9 has been given this bizarre political spin in the past couple of decades, so instead of being the very real substance that it is, it's this mythical juice that politicians take, and therefore the reality of it has gone down the drain, and the slot media has labeled it a QAnon conspiracy theory, even though QAnon is just a bunch of feds, but I do digress. And yes, I say
Yeah, so as you can see that they know that we're onto it. They know that they've given away too much information on this, and it's all been put in our face. And I want to fast forward now to um, the interview with Sandra Bullock. Um, yeah, they talk about here about young blood. That's what the video before this one was on about, and about this guy that's yeah trying to look young. Um, Peter Thiel, I think his name was. Yeah, Peter Thiel. He's the guy that was saying he wants to inject himself with young blood. Blah blah blah. But then it gets even weirder. Oh, this is the guy here. The Sound of Freedom. So I'll just go quickly here.
In the Count of Monte Cristo. He went on the record as stating that he knows children were being trafficked and tortured for the sake of harvesting C9. Here's the clip for you.
Especially our country, because they're pulling kids out of the darkest recesses of hell right now, in dumps and all kinds of places. The children, look, where we're at right now. Hopefully, we need your prayers. Essentially, you have adrenaline in your body. I'll just simplify it. And when you are scared, you produce adrenaline. If you're an athlete, you get in the fourth quarter, you have adrenaline that comes out of you. If a child knows he's going to die, his body will secrete this adrenaline, and they have a lot of terms that they use. It's the worst horror I've ever seen. Is screaming alone, even if I never, ever saw it. It's beyond, and these people that do it, there'll be no mercy for them. A lot of people that are involved in it all over the world that are in this. And many of these people are very famous.
This statement was made during a promotional interview he was doing in 2021 for the film aforementioned. Caviezel expressed his thoughts on the matter and the information he
The film The Sound of Freedom.
knew once more on Steve Bannon's show, discussing how it's an elite drug that has been used for years. He stated that it's 10 times more potent than heroin and has mystical qualities in terms of making you look younger. The last pitch to be setting off bars, though, as we discussed the studies and the startups and the tech bro lizards, all following this young blood youthfulness idea. But wait for this. Caviezel states that the term used by consumers of C9 in these high-level circles is Ambrosia. And what was the name of that startup earlier doing young blood injections founded by the guy who doesn't seem to really exist? Oh yeah, Ambrosia! Tim Ballard himself, the man for whom the film Sound of Freedom is based off of, weighed in on the topic of C9 on a Jordan Benzo Peterson interview, admitting that it's real and proving it with accounts of African witch doctors engaging in the process. He hints at his knowledge of something more as well. The man who actually knows what's going on in these rings and has seen it firsthand and has stopped it and has saved children. I'm going to trust him more than the people at Snopes who are trying to tell me this is all fake. And seriously, is it hard to imagine the government via the media, which has created fake reasons to go to war with other countries, wouldn't be able to hide something like this or wouldn't try to? These nefarious acts are...
Yeah, so that's a little bit of background on that. And then I just want to fast forward to this interview with Sandra Bullock on the Ellen Show, which is really a slap in all of our faces.
This facial that you're obsessed with, that how many did you get the whole cast of Ocean's 8 to do
Not
this?
everybody.
Okay, and, good, smart ones.
Just those that I thought would appreciate it.
Okay, explain what it is.
Well, it's this way in which one forces through microneedling. It's like a little roller with these, some of you, I think many of you know it, and it pushes through the skin and ruptures the collagen and then boosts it. You look like a burn victim for a day, but then it pushes the
What are you pushing into the skin, Sandra?
Sarah?
Carrie? What are you pushing into the skin?
Well, you push in whatever the facialist would like to insert into your pores.
But what is it?
It is an extraction from a piece of skin that came from a young person far, far away, and they somehow figured out how to extract.
It's foreskin from a Korean baby. That's what it is.
No, okay.
Who comes up with this?
I don't think, it's not like I'm lying there with little pieces all over my face. It's like,
Who thinks of collecting it and having it for, we'll do something with this someday.
And why didn't we come up with that?
Right. It'd be rich.
And so we call it, I call it the penis facial, and I think when you see how good it is to your face, you too will run to your local facialist and say, give me the penis. It's gonna happen. Give me the penis.
Yeah.
That's what you're gonna say.
I'm never gonna say that.
That's
never
you just maybe make it smaller.
No, I don't even understand why that is a thing that you'd put that into your skin. Why do you want that? You know what's going to happen? Penises are going to start growing out of.
The sorts of things, that being the consumption and usage of child body parts and human body parts, are actually happening all around us, whether or not we want to admit that. And I also do suspect that, as referenced earlier, one of the major reasons why C9 has been so covered up is because Big Pharma has an incentive to push this whole thing under the rug and quash the story as well, because what these three men, intimately familiar with schizophrenia and schizophrenics, uncovered is completely groundbreaking. It's logical, it makes sense even to the non-scientists like myself when I read their papers, and the solution to schizophrenia, the cure, is relatively cheap, and you could basically do it for everyone pretty quickly. Digressing, there are also high-ranking government officials who would be in the know of such things and if they are real. Take, for instance, the testimony of Robert Steele.
These children are not just kidnapped and in some cases bred by families as a cash crop. We have people in the United States of America that breed children in order to sell them. And when they are sold, they come without birth certificates, which means it's easier to kill them and have no one ask where they are. We're also importing children by the plane load. Again, children who have no documentation. It's not just child slavery or child abuse. It's also child torture, because you have adrenalized blood. You have the whole blood drinking ceremony of the satanic world. It's also the use of children for harvesting body organs. We'll have the Falun Gong testimony tomorrow.
A lot mentioned there is really for future episodes, but it seems important because too many people with too many close connections to these industries and to the government are stating that this C9 thing is real and know that it's being taken and harvested. People have also noticed that Pixar movies, which are first and foremost for kids, also contain an Easter egg entitled A113, which is meant to be a funny Easter egg reference to the classroom where the original animators came from or something like that. At least that's true at face value, but if you were to look up A113 followed by the word substance or compound, C9 is the first thing that comes up. I'm not messing with you, you can give it a try yourself. There's also the very specific Pixar film Monsters, Inc., which is all about scaring children and collecting a red substance in airtight containers, but hey, whatever. That being said, this is where we've reached the point of the bridge where things get really rickety, and I imagine us standing over a pool of crocodiles right now. If you take another step, it might break and fall right down. And that's what happens to so many people who discuss this theory. There are so many real things about this, and so much actual proof it's happening, it's crazy. But people like to take that last step and then go, and Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump or Joe Biden is currently drinking it. And then you lose so many people because you cannot prove that.
Look at him. He looks scary. Oh my God, you can't tell me that's human. You can't tell me that's human. That is unbelievable. But there you have it. A113 in Toy Story, and then obviously Monsters Inc. The references are crazy. It's subliminal messaging. It's all in our faces. They love it. It's all Pixar and Disney, and it's a messed up club. It's a big club, and you and I ain't in it. As as the uh as the comedian Bob Carlson, was it? Would say. But yeah, what do you guys reckon? I know it's gone pretty deep into this topic, but good old Joey Biden, he's had a bit of you know what. But comment down below, like, subscribe. I don't know what I'm gonna be doing after this one. I'm gonna let this one sink in for a while. But yeah, as you know, it's a very deep and dark sort of rabbit hole once you get into it. But Scoop of Coop did a really good job of explaining it for us. So yeah, go and support his channel, like and subscribe, and yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one. See ya.